Welcome everybody to day 2 of the Northwest Event Show 2025 in the Interact and Innovate stage. We are wearing Quiet Events headphones. Their booth is right behind us. There is a volume rocker on the right-hand side if you want to turn your volume up or down. Just be careful. If you hit the white button, you'll change colors and you'll no longer be able to hear, but I will be keeping my eye out. If I see your color change, I'll run you over a new pair of headphones. We want to thank Interprify, who is providing us with closed caption. And we want to have a big thank you over to our audio crew. Own the Night. Thank you, Nathan and Adam from Adam DJ Services. We have a panel of fantastic guests here for our collaboration to address the rising costs of events. And to lead this panel, we have Sharon Andrade, CEO and founder of HLeadership.
Thanks, Jimmy, and welcome. So there's this rumor out there that the cost of events keeps going up. In fact, 47% of event planners that were surveyed by Bizaboo in 2024 indicated that increasing costs is one of their most high dissatisfiers. So we've got some panelists who are going to share their insights as to how to manage and address collaboratively the rising costs of events. Let me introduce our panelists. First of all, we have Cynthia Lydum. And Cynthia is I wanted to get her official title right. She's the VP of Global Accounts at Conference Direct. So she works with clients to place business all over the world, really. And so welcome to Cynthia. Next, we have Kalena Wold, who is the Senior Director of Global Events at SAP. So Kalena is responsible for, again, citywide events and a number of events, again, globally. So welcome to Kalena. And Robbie Taves is the Regional Director of Sales for Encore for the Pacific Northwest. So he covers all of the Pacific Northwest for Encore, and including all of the hotels that Encore serves. So welcome to Robbie.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get started with a quick icebreaker. I'm going to ask each one of you, would you rather, if you have a little weekend away, are you going to go to a lodge in the mountain, or are you going to go to a resort at the beach? Let's hear each of your answers so that our audience can get to know a little bit about you. Robbie, start us off.
This one's easy for me, and contrary to most, I think, in the Northwest that are here for the nature, I'm leaving because we get to see and partake in that every day, and I'm going for some pool action with a swim-up bar and maybe even some time with the massage. I'm going to the resort.
Okay, you're going to the resort on the beach. Okay, but the qualifier is that it has to have a pool and a swim-up bar.
That sounds fantastic.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Robbie. Kalena, what about you?
Yes. So I'm also going to pick the resort on the beach, although I'm going to pick a Washington beach. Love the kind of gray, cloudy skies, and the movement of water produces positive ions, and I think we could all use a little bit more of those.
Ooh, good answer. Positive ions. Nice. And Cynthia, raise your hand if you already know the answer, what Cynthia's going to say. So, resort at the beach or lodge in the mountains?
Well, definitely resort at the beach. I always tell people if I wanted to camp or be more rustic, I would work for the Parks Service. But instead, I worked in hotels. So I'm going to go resort all the time, every time.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. Okay, so with the rising cost of events, there's so many things that have been driving up costs, right? It's been inflation. It's been increasing labor costs. The labor costs in the Seattle area, for instance, just minimum wage has gone up 38% in the last 4 years. So that's significant, right? The cost of food, just food in general, not food and beverage in hotels, but the food in general, in the U.S. has gone up 65% since the pandemic. So we see the cost in the grocery stores, and we all see the cost and what that does to events. So let's go to Kalena with the first question, which is, how have budgets and rising costs affect the type of events, and how does it meet the demands of the business?
Yeah, so just to kind of put put a context on my response here. So my stakeholders are my clients are my leadership, and my customers are the users of SAP. So when we're looking at how we should be prioritizing our budget throughout the year, we really have to focus on what's going to drive the most ROI, how are we going to bring that value back to the business. And when budgets are decreasing and event costs are going up, it means you really have to get creative. And I think a lot of people in this little area can probably agree that creativity is key right now. Some of the things that I think about when we're given a budget or given prioritization is oftentimes, what can we reduce? How can we get more efficient? How can we do more with less? Cutting an event is often met with, we could not possibly do that. How could we do that? So an example that I thought of in planning for today was thinking more holistically across not just what I'm tasked with, but what my other partners across the business are tasked with. We have an event that we do annually in New York City. It's a customer event. It's a user conference. I went around to my partners across the business, our field marketing teams, our community champions, our executive leadership, and said, what other programs are priorities? How can we move those to this space? We have it booked. We kind of have a hub. We have executives there. We have our specialists there. How can we make this more efficient? We ended up increasing our contract slightly with, a limited food and beverage minimum increase. We ended up hosting 4 additional meetings that ended up doubling the pipeline that we drew from that event. By capitalizing on the people that were there, having more value really present in one setting for our customers, really paid off. So trying to think about not just what you're tasked with to do, and again, I'm kind of speaking from the corporate lens here, but not just what you're tasked to do, but what are the others in your business tasked to do? So thinking creatively that way.
Creativity and adaptability, using space for, kind of consolidating and using the resources that you have sounds like a couple of the things. Mm-hmm. Has your organization's budget kept up with these rising costs?
Absolutely not.
What?
Not in the slightest. And that's, something that I think we faced before events were skyrocketing, but it's even more, more challenging now, because you're having a harder time getting people to travel. We just had an event last week where we had almost 10% of our customers cancel in the last 2 weeks due to geopolitical climate issues, airline issues, lots of reasons. So we lost revenue from that too. So having to kind of weight, what you're planning with your budget, but also with some of these factors like registration fees that aren't really a guarantee anymore.
That's a really good point. And so you're looking at, there's a lot of uncertainty, mm-hmm. right? And so planning with that uncertainty can be a challenge, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like your organization's budget is not growing at the rate of the increasing costs. Do you have any advice for vendors, kind of negotiating in this high cost environment?
I do. And I brought another example with me for this one. I think this is an ever-changing challenge, and probably is going to continue to change as we all move forward together. We did a site visit in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, a month ago now. We don't have contracts in place. Nothing was signed, but we took a small skeleton crew of our kind of most trusted vendors with us to talk about what we were trying to do. The site visit was intended to confirm which spaces we were going to use, were we going to go through with the 3 contracts that we were looking at, and having our vendors there hear our perspective from the ground floor, what we were trying to achieve, how we were going to do it, and getting their input along the way, I think has actually ended up building an opportunity for them to help us with cost savings, but to be more efficient with what we're trying to do. It's a little bit unorthodox to kind of go to a site visit when you don't have contracts signed, to bring your vendors with you. But it really paid off, and we now have them kind of thinking ahead with us, and they understand our goals from the get-go. And this is going to be something I'll probably bring up multiple times today, because I think it's so important that instead of going to our partners, our suppliers, and saying, I want this in my breakout rooms and I want this on my show floor, instead of having them say, sitting next to them and saying, these are my goals. This is what I want to achieve. How can we do this together at the best rate?
That is a great example. Thanks, Kalena. And so what you're saying is getting the downline vendors. So you have your primary kind of venue as and then getting all of the suppliers that you need to collaborate with in that venue. So AV, for instance. So I'm curious. So Robbie, from Kalena's comment, how would that work for you and your team to be involved early in the process like that?
Yeah, I loved your answer, and I love the question, because I think your AV production company, like they're motivated to meet not only your scope needs, but if they're really connected, they want to meet your budgetary needs. And you teased me in advance with this question, and I had no idea this was going to be your exact response. But like what I had prepared was you want to talk to us early. And the reason is just that we can help you understand the programming, and so often the RFP does have exactly, to the line item of exactly what's being asked for instead of what we want to accomplish. And there's a lot of ways that we can get creative. An example of something I was working on with one of our venues that just this week, client wants to do a bunch of recordings, but not in all of their sessions. And this is across a number of breakouts. And so instead of operators in every single room, which you mentioned labor being costly, could we set up a control room where one or two operators could manage the recordings of a wide variety of sessions and really offer some significant savings? So, knowing that costs are on the rise, which now I understand why Safeway is the biggest item on my credit card bill. I had no idea about that 65%, but we feel that. And oftentimes AV or production is the last vendor that's spoken to. You're working on travel, you're working with the venue, you're working on food and beverage, and I often hear, gosh, there's a surprise. And that's the last thing we want. I think your production company would love, the fact that you're taking them with. They can then also talk about, like, how could we organize your breakouts in a way where these rooms have these services in it and this support. These rooms don't need that. And so let's stagger the sessions so that we maximize these rooms and the services in that space. That can be a ton of savings.
Great. So really the key here is early in the process, which is hard, right? If you're a contract, or if you're a hotel or a venue and you don't have the contract signed and you're bringing in your vendors, it's a lot of effort. And it might pay off, right? Because that collaboration starts from the very beginning.
Can I address that, though? I do think that your AV production companies, they would be happy to provide you a solution. And, I understand your presenters might have nominal, moderate changes. That's fine. That's actually easy to navigate. There's always going to be last-minute changes as you're entering an event, even week of, day of. But the reality is you have an idea about what your general session likely requires. You have an idea on about how many breakouts, and even if that number jumps from 10 to 20, you can still start to plan for what that looks like. And those conversations that you're having early on might even help dictate what your program looks like.
Great point. Love it. Okay, so speaking of contracting and how do you get there? So what are some of, Cynthia, going to you, what are some of the decision factors that you look for early in the process, like this example that we were speaking of? Can you share some of the decision considerations?
I think a lot of times when we are, a client gets an idea that they have to plan a meeting, or they are starting to form, what am I going to do? What is this meeting going to look like? Where is it going to go? You really have to start thinking about cities and sourcing and venues and what type of meeting you're going to have and what type of facility or city makes the most sense. And a lot of times when we start the sourcing process, we sit down and say, what type of city are we looking for? Are we looking for a big draw that we are going to get attendees to come to boost registration numbers so we can be a little more profitable in that area? Or do we need a secondary city that is going to be more cost effective and that would help us with savings all the way down to the bottom line? Or do we need to look where we can get airlift the best? So there's a lot of factors that will go into what cities and destinations we're looking for. Another thing that comes up is unions in certain cities and in certain venues. A lot of times we have to make a decision based on what is our production costs going to be in those cities where labor is high or overall costs are high. Certainly most of us know which cities are going to be a little more expensive than other cities. So you have to weigh all that together. If we want a city that's going to draw well, but we may have to pay more, is that worth it? Or should we look at a mid-tier city that will be more reasonable and really try to pump up the marketing and get more people to that city? And then, we get even granular to look at things like, can we get a rebate or a subsidy from that city? Will that help us? We've selected some cities where we did get a nice bottom line adjustment to our master bill, and that makes a big difference in some meetings where we really want to have that bottom line. So if you're a venue that has some marketing dollars, and I know even across Washington State, for those booking meetings in our own state, there are some cities that will do subsidies and they have marketing dollars, and those are things that really speak to a client's bottom line. And so we'll look at all of those factors as we decide what type of city we want to look at or what type of venue. So all of that gets done at a very macro level as we're starting to plan the meeting.
So those are some of the considerations in selecting kind of early the venue or the city. What are some of the factors like, okay, so you've narrowed down the city and you've got a couple of venues that you're thinking about. What are some of the factors that are later in the process, like as you get closer to contracting?
I think one thing that's critical that we do is we really talk with our key clients and ask them, what are some factors for you? Is it, is hotel room rate going to be a factor for you? Do we need to look at food and beverage minimums? Do we need to look at what kind of costs can we save to the bottom line? Airport transfers, can we get discounts in the food and beverage? We kind of sit down and look and see what are most critical to running the program. Sometimes clients, you can offer them 10 massages, but if they can't accept them, that doesn't make any sense to offer those things. So we want to make sure our concessions are very intentional, that they usually are going to help our bottom line. So we'll start looking at what we really need to help make this program work. We want to look at the space that we need. We want to look at move-in and move-out days. I know sometimes people hate seeing that on an RFP, that there's no way they need 3 days of load-in. Well, they really do. If we're coming in and we have to pay double overtime over a weekend, we'd like to get loaded in Thursday and Friday. We don't want to pay labor over the weekend. So those are factors that we really look at when we're at that contracting phase and seeing where can we save money at the bottom line. And there's just so many factors that go into the contracts as well. I think somebody once said there's 85 negotiable pieces in a standard hotel contract. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of terms. And we also are really looking at terms that we can negotiate. Can we negotiate resale? Can we negotiate cancellation, that we can have a rebook? All of that is actually money that can drop to the bottom line for a client. So we really want to drill down to everything. And I do want to just share one thing that we've done with Encore in some of our contracts. If we know we're going to bring our own production company with us, and a lot of times it makes sense to travel with your own, and I know that's always a tough thing for a hotel to handle, but we bring in qualified people that have known this program very well. But Encore will work with us. In one case, in Vegas, there's exclusivities in the breakouts that their team has to do it. Well, if we guarantee them a minimum amount of money for their Encore on-site people, they will waive the breakout fees. And that's what we've had success doing, because we want to be a good partner and we want to give them a little bit of money. It's not going to be what they would have made, but they also see the whole value of the piece of business for the hotel. So we're having to get kind of creative about what we ask for, but it's really critical in the contracting phase to make sure we button all that up, because if it's not contracted, it's called begging at the end, if we don't get what we want.
It's called
or
begging.
What we need. Then I always say it's not in the contract, so now we have to start begging. And and we love our partners, and so we usually try to work very well with you. We want everybody to have a win, and working with clients like SAP and a lot of my other clients, we all want it to be we're not looking for an adversarial relationship. We're looking for a partnership, and we want to work together.
Absolutely. Collaboration is key, right? And that's kind of the title of our session. So it's really about collaborating with the vendor, whether it's the hotel or the venue or the AV provider or the transportation provider. And so this question isn't in the prep, but what do you think that key to collaboration is? Does anybody want to kind of give their thoughts on that? So when you have a really good partnership compared to somebody where maybe you're just you don't have that relationship in advance, what is the key to collaboration, I guess, is my question. A good collaboration on managing the event and the event outcomes as well as the costs. Go ahead, Kalena?
I think I would say being accountable on both sides. So as a client saying, these are my expectations, these are my goals, and having the supplier or the partner respond in kind to say, okay, I understand, this is how I would interpret that, and this is what my recommendation would be. I think building a relationship of trust, to your point, that trust isn't there to begin with. So having that open communication and understanding and really listening to one another and to what each other need to achieve, whether it's the business goals, the needs required to execute the event, or even the contracting piece.
And I would piggyback on that. Oh, sorry, Robbie.
Go ahead.
To say transparency. I'm a big believer in being transparent. Be transparent about, this is the program we're bringing into your city or venue. This is where we need help. This is what, and just sharing those truths. I think sometimes people want to hold their cards and they don't want to give up everything, but I feel like you're so much more collaborative if you share your transparencies and just be transparent and say, this is what I'm working against. Or we had a scenario a couple years ago coming out of COVID. We were having a meeting going back into Orlando, and we knew we were not going to hit our block. And we reached out to the hotel 2 months out, and we said, here's where we're at. We're not going to come where it was a rebooking from COVID. And I said, we'll start releasing chunks of rooms for you guys to sell to spring break if you would, let us keep working at this and be working together and be very, we just came in and said, we're not going to hit this. We're being very transparent. And we worked together and we sold the hotel out, and the hotel appreciated that we kept releasing rooms further out than we normally would have. But we knew we were going to probably be in trouble, and we ended up coming in pretty darn close and selling them out, and so saved us a lot of attrition fees, and the hotel got to make a lot of money as well. So just being like, here's our challenge, being transparent. Okay.
Yeah, I would add, if you have the chance to get on the phone with your production partner, I think that goes a long way. I try to encourage my teammates to jump on Teams, even to be able to read their body language and just understand, like, where are you at? There's so much that can be learned in that, and I think that I know everybody's busy, and so sometimes we have to solve a lot over email, and we also want to have the tracking of all that, but being able to talk through what you're really looking for, you talked about being creative, and I think creativity often takes a discussion, and it takes sometimes throwing things against the wall just to see, like, this is new to you, and it's a little bit harder to explain new scenarios in an email. So if you have the time to spend even 10 minutes with your vendor, I think that can go a long way.
Yes, absolutely. So creativity. So who saw Sarah Wells yesterday? Did anybody see Sarah? So one of the things that she shared, she's an Olympic athlete, and one of the things that she shared is that all the Olympic athletes she's a hurdler, take 15 strides in between hurdles. And she had an injury, and her coach said, try taking 16 strides. She's like, no, I can't do that because you don't win the Olympics taking 16 strides. But guess what? It was because it was such a different mindset. And so it reminded me what you're talking about. Sometimes we have to get out of our box, right? So she ended up taking 16 strides, and it worked really well for her. So getting out of our comfort zone, that, this is the way we've always done it, and kind of getting those kinds of thought processes, it does take collaboration. It's harder to do just on one side or the other. So if the venue is willing to collaborate and have these kinds of possibility discussions, instead of just, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, right? So, okay, thank you. So I wanted to ask, so with these rising costs of events, how is that being passed on to the end user? I mean, is that something that you're passing along? Kalena?
Yes. It absolutely is. I think registration fees are an easy way that we see that. Obviously, the cost per attendee goes up, so we need to increase our registration fees. I would also say that you see this in, how did I put this, downsizing. So events that maybe used to be 3 to 4 days are now 2 to 3 days. Events that used to be full days are now half days. So you're seeing less time committed, which isn't actually a bad thing for the end user, right? The attendee, they get more time back in their lives. So really this may be maybe silver lining of it all, that we're being more considerate of our people's time and their day jobs and all the other things that they have to do in their lives. Booking and contracting, I think, is another, while it's not passed on, but I do think we need to consider booking and contracting and agenda planning, and you mentioned this when you were talking about the partnership, really like considering your agenda based on how you can be most efficient with what you have. So if you're going to spend X amount of dollars, that means you can have X amount of breakout rooms. How can you plan your agenda to the most optimized place with that? And save some dollars there to be able to provide more for your attendees. There was a lot wrapped up in that.
No, that makes total sense. It's really kind of reimagining your meeting,
Yes,
right? So
totally.
does it need to be 3 days? Can we still have the same outcomes? So focusing on the big picture and the outcomes, can we still get the same desired outcome, but structure it differently?
100%.
You brought up operators for like weekend setups and how to avoid costs that way. You could do the same thing with your sessions. You could have operators that are doing a morning session, and if you give a break in between, then they could be the same operators for an afternoon session, but you could time things to avoid overtime. Like there's a lot of ways that you can get creative because labor is really a big part of this.
Okay.
And it all takes communication.
Yeah.
And you were kind of talking about this earlier as well. Like communication is hard and it takes a lot of time, but it in the end pays off. We see this in our jobs, we see this in our relationships. You kind of see this in everything, right? Taking the time to build a relationship, to build trust, to have these kinds of conversations where you can actually collaborate with your partners or with your suppliers can really pay off.
Yes, makes total sense. So relationships, collaboration, but wait, we have this thing called AI that's taking over the world. So how is technology going to help us in terms of being more efficient, maybe reimagining things and or just in general? So Robbie, do you have some thoughts on how being in the technology world, how technology is going to help us?
Yeah, so for Encore specifically, because we are in so many venues, we touch most meeting planners. And we have a new tool called the customer research tool, which, it's using AI to basically pull all your information together so that you don't have to start over each time that you're talking to us. I want that to be a takeaway for you all. If you're talking to an Encore sales rep, say, have you used the customer research tool to see everything that I've done so that you don't have to start over on pricing? What sort of discounts, what sort of concessions, what sort of solutions are you looking for? They can take your previous orders, bring that into your new event, and use that as a starting point, at least to understand what you're looking to do. Then you can get creative because they'll still have an idea of what the flow has been. We're using Medallia and things of that nature to get customer feedback so that we can always pivot and adjust to client needs. I'm sure internet's going to come up as a hot topic, but I can tell you that if you aren't asking for your bandwidth usage reports, that's a huge miss. You can find out how much bandwidth you're needing, and how much bandwidth you're using, and then for your next conference, you might tailor your request around that instead of simply guessing. And cell phone plans a lot of times have data packages. Like you might be able to find significant savings instead of offering Wi-Fi for all and just coming up with this blanket amount. Your bandwidth usage reports from previous events can really help tailor to what your true needs are.
That's a great point, because I think with Wi-Fi in particular, and we talked about this, is some organizations or conferences expect free Wi-Fi, right? Because it's readily available in so many places. So why does Wi-Fi cost so much in some of these venues?
Yeah, so it is really challenging to be the seller of the invisible product. It, I think, creates frustration as far as understanding why, because everywhere you go, there is free Wi-Fi. But when you get that free Wi-Fi experience in a Starbucks, if you have an issue, no big deal. You walk outside, you're on your data package, and it's not imperative. But when you're at a meeting, everything has to be flawless. You have to be able to get online. You have to be able to download those materials. At the same time, you have hundreds or thousands of people that need to be able to access that within a very compressed space. And so the density of your access points and the controller that's managing all of that, like all of that stuff has to be upgraded every few years. Well, that means that your venues are spending millions to install, and every few years they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through upgrades. Then there's the bandwidth. They have to be able to accommodate the partitioning for a bunch of different groups and all of that. And so they have to have significant bandwidth, which means a monthly cost that they're taking on that is significant. It's much more than what you get at your home. And then there's security, because there's people out there that are going to try to hack your conference, whether you know it or not, whether you want it or not. And it doesn't matter what hotel brand, insert brand here, they can't have that attached to their name. They don't want that for your experience. And so when you think of all of that, and then we have to have technicians there, because if you have an attendee struggling to get online because your protocols for your laptop at your organization make it challenging and there's firewalls, like you have to have that support. When you take all of that, it's not just bandwidth you're paying for. And the hotels, the reason they came to Encore about 15 years ago and they said, hey, can you sell this? Because they were struggling. It's because they needed an ROI, like the ownership of hotels, in order to continue to invest, to be able to make sure it was secure, fast, robust. Like they said, we have to monetize this or we can't continue to invest in it. So it is challenging, but it's a very different experience, that free service that we get in Starbucks versus what you're expecting for most events. But I do go back to the fact that, like, you might not need free Wi-Fi for all of your attendees. You can create a group of bandwidth for your presenters, your VIPs, your executives, and give your attendees a very different experience and pay, maybe a smaller amount if you partition things that way.
Great. That was very informative. Thanks, Robbie. So there are a lot of costs that go into actually having dedicated bandwidth and secure bandwidth, right? So thank you. So we've been talking about creativity a lot, Cynthia. What are some creative ways that you have been able to stretch an event budget?
I actually did write a few things down. I have some clients that are maybe more on a government type budget that are trying to be very mindful of costs. They need to make sure that they can, first of all, get the meeting funded, and then if they get the meeting funded, they need to make sure that they are going to be able to execute it, have it be a good meeting representative of their organization, but still keep the costs very low. And there's a couple of things some of my clients have done. Sometimes we start the meeting maybe at 10, the first day of the meeting we started at 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning. And that way people can either drive the night before or drive early in the morning. I'm speaking more to Washington State meetings. And that way you don't have to pay for a breakfast, but then you kind of get a full day, and then maybe you have a networking event in the evening. And maybe the networking event is just two hosted tickets and a little bit of food and beverage, so people feel like they're getting this experience, but you're not paying for a full reception, a full bar for the evening. And a lot of times, most of my groups now say bring your own water bottle. I think that's very prevalent now, and that's just a really easy fix to tell people to go, refill the water at most hotels and venues have water bottle fillers, and that's just another way to not have to put bottled water or lots of beverage options on your buffet. And then also, one thing that one of my clients does, he recycles all of his badges, and including the lanyards. And I didn't know this until he shared with me that you can wash your lanyards in the dishwasher and then dry them and reuse them. So I kind of thought that was very creative, that because I don't know what people do with lanyards. I don't know so I thought that was kind of an interesting way to save some money. And then another thing we've done on some groups is we pay for lunch, but we serve the dessert in the afternoon. So then people feel like they're getting something sweet, but you're not giving them lunch, lunch, dessert, and then cookies at a break. So those are little things, but they can really add to the bottom line. And to what Robbie talked about, we look at our Wi-Fi use. We know that not everybody will jump on the hotel Wi-Fi. And so we don't provide bandwidth for the whole entire group, because a lot of people just stay on their data plans and they don't want to go into the hotel Wi-Fi. So we really look at on some groups, we look at our bandwidth and just order enough. But to your point, it's better to know ahead of time and put it in the contract. We're definitely finding it just makes it easier and not as unpleasant when you get on, starting those planning conversations if you haven't addressed Wi-Fi, and just be very upfront and be transparent about what you need, because it's just easier through the planning process to look out for all of those costs. And just really being mindful of everything you spend, because some groups are, if they don't bring their money in at budget, they don't get to repeat the meeting. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with groups that are more budget minded, that you really want to be their partner and help them try to stay within their budgets, and they will appreciate it.
Thanks, Cynthia. So I'm going to put my hotel hat on for a moment, which is, okay, when I hear, okay, there's no breakfast, and they're driving in that morning, and I hear that we're doing a reception instead of a dinner, how do the hotels, who are accustomed to getting that revenue or accustomed, that's kind of revenue, it's the cost savings for the customer. So are there other ways that the hotel can still make it pencil out, like through meeting room rental, or, which typically, is that something that maybe you would pay in lieu of?
Well, sometimes, yes, you might have to pay meeting room rental. But another thing that we do with some of our programs throughout the state is if we do have a lighter reception, we ask them to keep their bars and restaurants open later, especially if we're in a remote location that maybe doesn't have access to a lot of restaurants. And at first, hotels were a little resistant. Oh, no, we're going to close at 7 p.m. That's when we always close. So we went to them and we've shared with them how much revenue we've done in restaurants and bars after the fact. And then when they start seeing those figures, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yes, and maybe they'll charge us $400 to keep the bartender at their regular bar. We're not paying for the food and beverage, but they've got 300 people on their own, after they've had a little bit to eat and a drink. And we've had some groups that will keep the bar going until 11. We've had some that the bartender said, this group is so fun, we kept it open until midnight. So, and again, it goes back to my transparency, just telling them, hey, I've got 300 people that are going to be captive that night. I know your restaurant closes at 7. I need it to stay open. And just really, but we do get a lot of pushback, which is surprising to me as a former hotelier. But now that we've gone back to some of those places, they're like, oh yeah, we'll stay open, no problem. So I think you do have to be mindful of what the hotel is, they could be losing some revenue. But again, that's why we do source multiple properties, because maybe we're not a right fit for that hotel.
And that goes back to collaboration, right? So thinking of ways that are out of the ordinary, which is, we know that we bring this much revenue to your bar, so stay open and make some money. And then having that be receptive, right? Sometimes if we're too siloed, if it's just, sales over here and then operations over here, but if it's truly one hotel, then you can really collaborate and take advantage of those opportunities. I'm going to look to the audience. Do we have any questions for our 3 panelists? If you have a question, we'll bring you a microphone. You can really ask them anything about decision processes, how they manage costs, anything else that you would want to know in terms of how they work their magic. So we do have some questions over here. Oh, you were just scratching your head. Okay, I think we have one back here.
Hi, I'm Sam with Flyfoot Productions. I was curious, we've got captioning, and I've seen plenty of people using ASL, sign language. How often in those events, in your events, is kind of like the standard? I know Microsoft has a certain standard, right? So I didn't know if that approaches other clients as well. They have a certain standard. They might need to meet with SAP or whomever. Because I know that's part of everybody we have to service. We want to. So is it becoming a standard so much? How often? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I can answer that. I'm sure you have comments on this as well. From the SAP side, looking at the big tech companies, you're probably going to see 100%. We would have live captioning in, I don't know, what did we have, 6, 7 languages last week, in addition to ASL, through breakouts, through keynotes. One area I'd like to explore is how do you translate the one-on-one conversations, the personalized conversations for people? So I think we should all put our heads together on how to do that better. But yeah, I would say 100%.
Yeah, we deal with all sorts of clients, so I would say it's incredibly varied. But to your point, larger organizations definitely. We do meetings large and small. But I do think with AI, it's going to become a bigger and bigger thing, especially for those that can't attend. The fact that you have this transcription available means that somebody can have that transcription read and broken down for them by AI and give them some nice summaries. They can ask for summaries based off of their department or certain findings that came out of that. And so it can be a really quick way to create summaries from the leadership team that could be broadcast out, or even for individual users.
Great. Answer your question? Okay. Does anybody else in the audience have a question? Yes, Anna, right here.
Hi. I'm an event planner for the Washington State Association for Justice. And so one way we offset event costs, which I'm sure everyone does, is bring in sponsors. And so my question is, if you have any suggestions or ideas on how we can, collaborate with the sponsors, bring them in so that they feel they're getting value from our attendees.
Great question. Anybody want to take that one?
I can give it a shot. It is an age-old question and a continuing challenge, I think, for everyone, because in addition to reg fees going up, sponsorship fees go up, and they're probably getting less. I would say being creative. Here we go again. Being creative. It's not just about having a booth on the show floor. It's about how you're engaging with people throughout the time. Is that through sessions? Is it through interactions? Is it sponsorships of other, receptions or lounges? But I love what you said about how can we bring them in and make them feel the value. Some of it's the conversations that we have with them. Can our sponsorship teams, the teams doing the sales, really talk to them about the goals that they're trying to achieve, and maybe we create custom packages to really make their experience better. So unorthodox again.
On the AV side, I think there's a ton. The network could be named by your sponsor, and the password could be their new product. You can use lower thirds on your screens in order to create, branding and things like that throughout the session. There's certainly our scenic elements that you can get going. But we've all sat in a movie theater and seen those questions that are on screen, and you kind of have fun as you're waiting for the show to start. Your sponsors could, the reason they're sponsoring is they probably have a question that they are very curious about from your attendees. And there's really cool engagement tools out there where you can ask and survey the team, all of the attendees. And so you could get really meaningful feedback from them. And if they then see that and they're seeing an ROI, I think they're much more likely to, make that investment as well, for future events.
And I had a local state association that had not used sponsors before, but they needed to grow because of all these, increasing costs. The planner that came in to take over the meeting knew that he was challenged with how do you add more money. So he went to the board and said, I suggest some sponsors. And they said, no, there's no way, we never want sponsors at this meeting. Well, then he showed them a sister organization, how much revenue sponsorship brought in. So then he went one step next and brought in some of the sponsors to their board meeting and explained what the sponsors were looking for. We'd like to be with part of your group. We'd like to spend some money in this meeting. And the board kind of started to turn a little bit and thought, oh, we could get some money to help cover some of our costs. We could do a little more, enhance the meeting for the members, and still have this partnership that made sense. It really did make sense. It wasn't sponsors that didn't align with their association. So they ended up adding this sponsorship package, and then as well as vendors and some booths. And what they ended up doing ultimately is they kept it to a day and a half with the sponsors. So the sponsors were there for the meals, they were there in the morning, they did a reception, and then they let them pack up on Thursday morning at 11, they were done, and then the rest of the meeting became just a membership meeting for the next 24 hours. So that was a way to kind of softly bring sponsors in and get some money, but it took about a year to get sponsors on board. So to your point, it's hard to keep everybody happy because your members want to not be felt like they're being sold to all the time, but then your sponsors want to come in and be part of it. So it's a delicate balance for sure.
Did that help, Anna? Okay, good. All right, other questions from the audience? Georgia.
Hi, thank you. We have a beautiful new venue out in a rural area in the Olympic Peninsula, Port Angeles, and it's state-of-the-art, it's gorgeous, $55 million investment, and it's 500-person performing arts and a 300-person conference center. And what we're really finding difficult is how to attract those conferences to us, the smaller or small to medium, because we're the perfect size. We have a community that's just hungry and ready for them, and we're a quarter of the cost of what it would cost in Seattle, but I'm just having a really difficult time trying to, after that SWOT analysis of how to bring them and capture them because the transportation to us is so difficult. We are not accessible by ferry. We're not accessible really by any plane service. All we have is a road that goes from Seattle to us, one road in and out of our town. That's it. And it's about 2.5 hours from Seattle. So do you have any tips or tricks to help?
What town is it in?
Port Angeles.
Oh, Port Angeles. Okay.
And so I try to say, well, it's great. It's a jump off, to Victoria. We're right at Olympic National Park, so you can really, have a package around entertaining with the group, either in the before, during, or after. And again, our town is so eager, but we just haven't been able to break it, and we don't know how.
Any thoughts on that, Cynthia?
Because I do contract a lot around Washington State, I would say, I'm sorry that I don't know your venue, because I probably do need to know that. But I would say, first of all, kind of know who your audience is going to be. Sometimes I think you want to jump on a national scale and you may not be ready for a national scale. So find out who is meeting in Port Angeles, like in other venues. See who's meeting in some of your other, similar destinations, like a Semiahmoo, like a Skamania, that's a Suncadia, that are maybe a little bit more remote, and definitely drive markets for the most part. And get some planners out there. Be part of WSAE, be part of PCMA. Start getting the word out, because our industry is small in Washington State, and everybody knows everybody, and people don't want to go to the same venues every single time, or the same hotels. They're always looking for new and exciting venues, but you really just have to, sometimes it is a grassroots approach, especially for a venue in a destination that doesn't have airlift or is on the path to anywhere. But I would say this is a great show to be at, to network with some local people. Try to just reach out to everybody that you can find through a SWOT analysis that does do meetings in Washington State, and that's where you want to start. I really am a firm believer that know who's in your backyard and meeting, and that's a good place to start, because that's going to be word of mouth eventually. But that's probably the best way, is get involved in your local programs that are in Seattle. Go to Olympia programs, and then get people out there. Sometimes that's really hard. We all get asked to go to a lot of places that we could go to, but sometimes getting somebody out there is the biggest, and just, even if it's like, just come out for one night, I'll put you up for one night, just come out and see it. And it's amazing how once somebody can see your property, they become an evangelist for you too. So, hope that helps.
Thank you. Anything else to add there? Okay, we can take one more question from the audience. Okay, we have one in the back here.
Hello, my name is David. We're event planners we're a small company that does events for cybersecurity marketers. And I had a question. We're always looking for venues, and one of the toughest things for us to negotiate is actually coffee, which we've done an event in 2023 without coffee, and everybody in our survey afterwards made note of that, said you must have coffee next year. So we did that next year, but then what we found was coffee can be, after service fees, $80 a person per day, and sometimes maybe 30-40% of your whole event budget is going towards coffee. And I was just wondering if there's any creative solutions, how to work with something like that.
Strategic timing, and kind of what Cynthia was saying earlier about starting meetings after 10 a.m., something that we've done, and I'm familiar with the coffee drama. Something that we've done is, if you do a breakfast package, have them keep the coffee longer, and then have your PM break start earlier. See how you can kind of, you're nodding, so I'm sure you've thought of this. You're like, I've done it all. At the end of the day, coffee's coffee. You got to serve it. Take a really close look at your consumption, because that's probably a big area where there's some loss. And I mean, that's on everything, bars, food, whatever. But coffee's a big area where they just bring out these giant urns of coffee, and you're not tracking that cup by cup. You're probably overpaying. So take a close look at consumption. That would be, other than the things you've tried, that would be my next best.
And I would piggyback on that get it in the contract in the beginning. So if you know you haven't selected your destination or your venue yet, say, okay, and again, communicate and just say, I'm going to go through a lot of coffee. I can't have it be 50% of my budget. I need you to work with me, because it is such a low cost, as we all know, because we all make it every morning in our homes. It is such a huge profit center for the hotels. But if the hotels really want your piece of business and you can show value in all the other things that you're offering, they're going to give you a deal on the coffee, but you're not going to get it after the contract signed. That's when it's begging. But if you go in and get it at the contract stage, you probably can get it negotiated in the contract that this is going to be the max amount you pay.
Do we have a comment?
Okay, we can take one more question.
So it's just a comment. So for you that's looking to, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Jerica. I'm an event planner for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Puget Sound, but also I have my own business and do this on the side. If you're looking to bring people to your event space that is not in the area, I would suggest partnering with people like Butler or other shuttle services that can offer that to your guests as well, and then they could do pickups from other places, and that'll be a great way to get them there. For you that's trying to find coffee options, what I would do was figure out what those venues have for their outside vendor costs and see if that is going to be a little bit more affordable than the per person, and then bring in a small business, specifically a Black small business that is looking to expand their reach and exposure, and they'll be willing to provide that service for your guests for as long as you ask them. Generally, for up to 150 to 200 people, you can get a great cost for that, so that'll kind of offset the cost there.
Great.
All right, thank you. So I would like each of our panelists to go ahead and leave our audience with one tidbit of advice, one final piece of advice on how to address rising costs. Robbie, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Well, I just want to reiterate, like, if you can start early and really talk about what it is that you're looking to have be the theme, what it is that you're looking to accomplish, what the key stakeholders have tasked you with. If you're having those conversations early on and you allow your partners to join you on that journey, I really think they can help you find savings in that. The other thing that I would kind of voice is, if I can have two, is I do think audience engagement, the tools that are available right now are so powerful. I mean, I could this polling plus that I was talking about that you could use for your sponsorship. If I could ask you all a question right now and put up a word cloud, like all of a sudden you're now connected to the content, and what your stakeholders are looking for is for the attendees to walk away feeling connected to the messaging. And not only does it help that for the presenters, because we'll change our content around your feedback, but then it gets you all connected as a group. I think there's some really cool things that will then help justify the spend as well. And that's not a costly solution anyway. So, yeah.
Great, thanks, Robbie.
Yeah.
Kalena, do you have?
Collaboration and communication. I think even just here, we had some great recommendations from the crowdsourcing, being open and having the time to have the conversations. It does take time, but it is so important and it will pay off.
And I would piggyback on both of those. And I also just wanted to add one thing. Isn't it great that we're back in person again? So isn't it great to have these problems and to be having to address challenges versus sitting in our homes all the time? So every time I get frustrated, I still remember, wow, live events are back. This is awesome. And yes, we have some challenges, and it's a tough time right now with events rising and our event costs rising, and costs are rising in our own homes. But if you're all here today, you're all here for a reason and a purpose, and it's because we love live events. So thank you.
Absolutely. And so collaboration, it's getting involved early in the process with not just your primary vendor, but your downline suppliers and vendors. Even coffee, negotiating early in the process. And the other thing is, sometimes, again, looking at the hotelier side of it, we get the checklist. We need this, we need this, we need this, and it comes through an electronic format, right? Behind that electronic format is a person who has bigger needs than what's maybe outlined in that checklist. So remembering that and how you can collaborate more fully and engage with the person behind that checklist could help propel that collaboration and begin it early. So thank you to our panelists so much for sharing their insights and knowledge. We have time if you guys have additional questions and you'd like to come up and ask, if that's okay. And thank you, our audience, for joining us today.